Your income was decided before you ever applied for a job. A single belief, measured on a simple questionnaire, predicts how much you'll earn across your entire career. And 83% of people hold the version of that belief that keeps them underpaid. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which version you carry and how to change it. In 1966, a psychologist named Julian Rotter published a paper that would quietly reshape how economists think about money. He called the concept locus of control. The idea is simple. Do you believe your outcomes depend on what you do, or do you believe they depend on luck, timing, and forces beyond your reach? Rotter built a 60-item questionnaire to measure where people fell on that spectrum. Internal meant you saw yourself as the driver. External meant you saw yourself as the passenger. The questionnaire became one of the most widely used psychological instruments of the 20th century. Hundreds of studies followed, and the pattern that emerged was uncomfortable. A panel study tracked over 6,000 Americans across 21 years. The finding: people with an internal locus of control earned significantly more per hour than their external counterparts. The gap was largest among entrepreneurs, where internals saw higher returns on every year of education they'd invested in. But even among employees, the effect held. Internals climbed faster, earned more, and were far more likely to move from low-paid work into higher-paid positions. So what separates these two groups in practice? Here's where it gets concrete. Internals don't just work harder. They make different decisions at every fork in the road. They invest more in education because they believe it will actually pay off. They search for jobs more aggressively and hold higher reservation wages, meaning they refuse to settle for less than their worth. They pursue more training, more skill development, more entrepreneurial risk. Each of those decisions compounds over decades. Externals, meanwhile, accept lower pay. They settle earlier. They skip the extra certification because some part of them whispers, "What's the point?" The economy decides. The boss decides. The system decides. Tom Corley spent 5 years studying 233 wealthy individuals and 128 low-income individuals. Wealthy meant earning over $160,000 a year with liquid assets above $3 million. Low income meant under $35,000 with almost nothing saved. The gap in their beliefs was staggering. 68% of wealthy people said they were in full control of their destiny. Among low-income people, that number dropped to 41%. Nearly 4 out of 5 wealthy people attributed their financial success directly to their beliefs. But here's the question that should bother you. Did the belief create the wealth, or did the wealth create the belief? This is where the research gets sharp, because the longitudinal data tracks people before they earn anything. Young people with internal locus of control invest more in their education years before they see a paycheck. The belief comes first, the income follows. And the belief often comes from your parents. A large UK cohort study found that children of mothers with internal locus of control developed better language skills, scored higher on cognitive tests, and had fewer behavioral problems. The mechanism is straightforward. Internally oriented parents teach problem solving. They model self-reliance. They frame setbacks as solvable. Their children absorb that framework and carry it into adulthood, into careers, into their own parenting. The cycle repeats across generations. The reverse cycle is darker. Martin Seligman identified it in 1967 through a series of experiments that became famous under a grim label: learned helplessness. Dogs subjected to inescapable shocks eventually stopped trying to escape. Even when the door was wide open, the animal had learned that its actions didn't matter. So it quit. Seligman later connected this directly to poverty, writing that poverty has devastating effects on breeding helplessness. When people grow up watching their parents struggle despite effort, the lesson sinks in below conscious awareness. Why try? Nothing changes. Ruby Payne documented how this mentality passes from parent to child, creating generational poverty cycles reinforced at every level: economic, social, psychological. A 2025 research paper confirmed these multi-level poverty traps, showing how they lock in place without outside intervention. The uncomfortable math: only 17% of people score high on internal locus of control. That means the vast majority are operating with a belief system that actively suppresses their earning potential. A trainable, changeable belief system. Carol Dweck's research at Stanford runs parallel to this. Her growth mindset framework, the belief that ability can be developed rather than being fixed at birth, produced one of the most striking findings in educational psychology. A 2016 study of 168,000 Chilean students found that low-income students with a growth mindset performed academically as well as fixed mindset students from families earning 7 times more. One belief: closing a 70 percentile income gap. And low-income students were twice as likely to hold the fixed mindset, the version that held them back. You're probably wondering whether you can actually shift something this deep. The active study gives a clear answer. 10 one-hour cognitive training sessions produced measurable increases in internal locus of control. The effect persisted at 5-year follow-up, 10 hours. That's less time than most people spend scrolling in a week. Attributional retraining, a therapeutic approach that teaches people to attribute outcomes to controllable causes, has been used successfully across contexts ranging from addiction recovery to cancer treatment to career development. Albert Bandura's work on self-efficacy adds another layer. He showed that the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it is bridged by belief. People can understand perfectly well that saving money matters. If they don't believe they're capable of saving, the knowledge changes nothing. The most effective way to build that belief, according to Bandura, is mastery experiences. Small wins, tiny proof that your actions produce results. This is the mechanism that makes locus of control self-reinforcing in both directions. Take one action, see one result. Your internal orientation strengthens by a fraction. Take another. The fraction grows. Each result becomes evidence that your effort matters, and that evidence rewires the assumption underneath everything else you do. The person who never starts never collects that evidence. They stay locked in the passenger seat, watching the scenery blur past, convinced the car drives itself. You probably inherited your version of this belief from people who inherited theirs. You've been running on borrowed assumptions about how much control you actually have. The research says those assumptions are wrong, and they're costing you money every year you leave them unexamined. 10 hours of deliberate work can start the shift. One small decision where you act as if the outcome depends on you. Then another. Then enough to tip the balance. The belief doesn't change because you decide it should. It changes because you stack enough evidence that the old version can no longer hold. Your parents gave you their answer to one question: who's in charge of what happens to me? You've been living inside that answer your whole life. Now you know it's a question you can answer for yourself.